The wail of the train whistle pierced the still Nevada air as Tabitha Cooper pressed her face against the dirty window, watching the vast wilderness of the American West unfold before her eyes. It was 1876, and everything she owned was packed in a single trunk, a trunk that represented her entire life in Boston and her uncertain future in Elko, Nevada. Her heart fluttered with a mixture of fear and anticipation as she twisted the gold locket around her neck, the only keepsake from her deceased parents. "First time heading west, miss?" asked an elderly woman seated across from her, knitting needles clicking rhythmically. Tabitha nodded, brushing a loose strand of auburn hair behind her ear. "Yes, madam, I'm to be married when I arrive. A mail-order bride." The woman's eyes softened with understanding. "Brave girl, who's the lucky fellow?" "A rancher named Samuel Pickering," Tabitha replied, the name still foreign on her tongue. She'd exchanged exactly 3 letters with the man who would become her husband, a man whose face she knew only from a small, faded photograph tucked inside her reticule. "He owns land outside of Elko." The train lurched suddenly, and Tabitha gripped the edge of her seat. They'd been traveling for days, and she was exhausted, her blue traveling dress wrinkled and her bones aching from the hard wooden bench. But discomfort was a small price to pay for escape. After her parents' death from influenza, the mounting debts and unwanted advances from her father's business partner had forced her hand. When she'd seen the advertisement seeking young women of good character for matrimony in the Western Territories, it had seemed like divine providence. As night fell across the Nevada landscape, Tabitha tried to calm her racing thoughts. Would Samuel Pickering be kind? Would she find happiness in this wild country? Sleep finally claimed her, her head lolling against the window as the train rumbled through the darkness. She awoke with a start to screaming and the deafening sound of gunshots. The train had stopped, and chaos erupted around her. Men in bandanas were moving through the passenger car, brandishing pistols. "Everybody stay calm and nobody gets hurt," shouted a masked man, his voice muffled behind a red bandana. "We're just taking valuables, not lives unless you make us." Terror seized Tabitha as the bandits moved methodically through the car, collecting watches, money, and jewelry. When one approached her, she clutched her reticule tightly. "Hand it over, pretty lady," he growled. With trembling hands, Tabitha surrendered her small purse containing the little money she had, but when the man reached for her locket, she instinctively pulled back. "Please," she whispered. "It was my mother's." The bandit hesitated for only a moment before yanking it from her neck, snapping the delicate chain. "Should have handed it over nice and easy," he sneered, pocketing the locket. Tears stung her eyes as she watched her most precious possession disappear. The bandits continued their robbery, eventually forcing passengers from the train. Tabitha stumbled into the cool night air, disoriented and afraid. "Line up over there," ordered another masked man, gesturing with his gun. The passengers huddled together as the bandits ransacked the luggage car. Tabitha watched in horror as one man dragged her trunk out and broke it open, scattering her meager possessions across the dirt. "Not much here worth taking," he called to his companions, kicking her clothes aside with contempt. Suddenly, a whistle sounded from the darkness. "Riders coming." "Let's go," the bandits scrambled, mounting horses that had been hidden in the brush. In the confusion, Tabitha saw her chance. While the other passengers remained frozen in fear, she bolted toward the trees, her heart pounding. She ran blindly into the darkness, branches scratching her face and tearing at her dress, the sounds of shouts fading behind her. She ran until her lungs burned, finally collapsing by a small creek. As the adrenaline ebbed, the full weight of her situation crashed down upon her. She was alone in the Nevada wilderness, miles from Elko, with no money, no possessions, and no way to contact Samuel Pickering. As dawn broke, Tabitha assessed her predicament. During her desperate flight, she'd lost her shoes in a muddy patch, and her stockinged feet were torn and bleeding. Her dress was ripped, her hair a tangled mess, and she had no idea which direction to go. For hours she wandered, following the creek, hoping it would lead to a settlement. The sun climbed higher, beating down mercilessly. By midday, Tabitha's throat was parched, her feet throbbing with every step. She tore strips from her petticoat to bind her injured feet, but it did little to ease the pain. As the afternoon waned, exhaustion and hunger overtook her. She sank to the ground beneath a cottonwood tree, wondering if she would die here, alone and unknown, before ever reaching Elko. Closing her eyes, she sent a silent prayer heavenward. The distant sound of hoofbeats roused her from her stupor. Scrambling to her feet, Tabitha peered through the brush. A lone rider approached along the creek, a tall figure silhouetted against the setting sun. For a moment, she hesitated. Was this salvation or further danger? Desperation won out. She stepped from her hiding place, waving her arms frantically. "Help," she called, her voice raspy from thirst. "Please help me." The rider pulled his horse to a halt, his hand instinctively moving to the pistol at his hip. As he drew closer, Tabitha could make out his features, a man perhaps in his early 30s, with a weathered face shadowed by several days' worth of beard beneath a wide-brimmed hat. His eyes, a startling blue, regarded her with caution. "Madam," he called, keeping a respectful distance. "You all right?" Tabitha took a step forward and nearly collapsed, her legs giving out beneath her. In an instant, the stranger was off his horse, catching her before she hit the ground. "Easy now," he said, his voice deep but gentle. "You're in a bad way." "The train," she managed to say. "Robbers. I ran." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "The Northern Pacific. I heard there was trouble. Town's been buzzing about a holdup." He glanced down at her bare, bloodied feet, and his expression softened. "Name's Caleb Grayson. I've got a ranch about 2 miles from here." "Tabitha Cooper," she whispered. "I was traveling to Elko to be married." Something flickered across Caleb's face, surprise, perhaps, or something else she couldn't identify. He nodded slowly, then removed his bandana and dipped it in the creek, gently cleaning the dirt from her face. "Let's get you somewhere safe, Miss Cooper. You can rest up and we'll figure out what to do." Before she could respond, he lifted her as though she weighed nothing and placed her atop his horse. Tabitha clutched the saddle horn, dizzy from exhaustion and relief. Caleb swung up behind her, one arm secure around her waist. "Hang on," he murmured close to her ear, and she felt herself lean back against his solid chest, too weary to worry about propriety. As they rode through the gathering dusk, Tabitha fought to stay conscious. The rhythmic motion of the horse, the warm presence of Caleb behind her, and the overwhelming events of the day conspired to pull her toward oblivion. The last thing she remembered was the distant glow of lamplight through a window, and then darkness claimed her. She awoke to the crackle of a fire and the smell of coffee. For a moment, disorientation gripped her. Where was the sway of the train, the hard wooden bench beneath her? Then memory flooded back. The robbery, her desperate flight, the kind stranger who had found her. Tabitha opened her eyes to find herself on a simple bed in a small but tidy room. Someone had removed her torn stockings, washed and bandaged her feet, and covered her with a patchwork quilt. A quick assessment revealed she was still fully clothed in her filthy, torn dress, though her outer garments had been removed. "You're awake," came a female voice, and Tabitha turned to see an older woman with silver-streaked hair standing in the doorway. "Caleb said you'd had quite an ordeal." "I'm Martha, his housekeeper. How long have I been asleep?" Tabitha asked, her voice still rough. "Nearly 14 hours, Martha replied, crossing to hand her a cup of water. "You were done in, poor thing." Tabitha drank gratefully, then tried to sit up, wincing as pain shot through her battered feet. "Easy now," Martha cautioned. "Those feet need time to heal. Caleb rode into town this morning to send word about you, said you were headed to Elko to be married." A flush crept up Tabitha's cheeks. "Yes, to a Mr. Samuel Pickering. He was expecting me yesterday." Martha nodded thoughtfully. "Pickering's place is a good 30 miles northeast of here. Caleb will be back soon. He'll know what to do." True to Martha's word, Tabitha heard the front door open less than an hour later, followed by the thud of boots on wooden floors. After a brief, muffled conversation, Caleb appeared in the bedroom doorway, hat in hand. "Miss Cooper," he greeted her, his eyes quickly assessing her condition. "Feeling any better?" "Yes, thank you, Mr. Grayson. I'm deeply grateful for your help." He shifted uncomfortably at her gratitude. "I've been to town, sent word to Pickering about what happened, but—" He hesitated, a frown crossing his features. "There's something you should know." Tabitha's heart sank. Had Samuel Pickering rescinded his offer of marriage upon learning of her penniless state, the train robbery was worse than we thought, Caleb continued. 2 men were killed, the conductor and a passenger who tried to fight back. The sheriffs formed a posse to hunt down the gang. How terrible, Tabitha whispered, thinking of the kind conductor who had helped her with her trunk. There's more, Caleb said, his voice gentle. I asked around about Pickering. Miss Cooper, the man hasn't been seen in Elko for nearly 3 weeks. His ranch hands say he rode out to Carson City on business and never returned. The news hit Tabitha like a physical blow. Perhaps he simply delayed, she suggested weakly, though a sense of dread was building within her. Caleb shook his head. The sheriff received a telegraph yesterday from authorities in Carson City. They found a body outside town, a man matching Pickering's description. They're waiting on confirmation, but tears welled in Tabitha's eyes, though not for the man she had never met. Rather, they were tears of despair at her own hopeless situation. Stranded in a strange land, robbed of everything, and now without even the promise of a marriage to provide security. I'm sorry, Caleb said quietly. You're welcome to stay here until you're recovered and can make arrangements. Arrangements, Tabitha echoed hollowly. I have no money, no possessions, nothing. I don't even have family back east to return to. Martha, who had been hovering in the doorway, stepped forward. Now don't you fret, we'll figure something out. First you need to heal, then we'll tackle the rest. Over the next several days, Tabitha regained her strength under Martha's watchful care. The housekeeper provided her with clean clothes, simple but serviceable dresses that had belonged to Caleb's late mother, and kept her company during the long hours when Caleb was out working his ranch. Tabitha learned that Caleb had inherited the modest spread 5 years earlier when his father passed. He ran cattle on 200 acres with the help of 2 ranch hands, Tom and Miguel. Martha had been with the family since Caleb was a boy and had stayed on after his parents' deaths, as much a part of the ranch as the land itself. By the end of the week, Tabitha could walk short distances, though her feet were still tender. She insisted on helping Martha with household tasks, desperate to feel useful and to repay some small measure of the kindness shown to her. Nonsense, Martha scolded when she found Tabitha attempting to knead bread dough. You're a guest. I'm a burden, Tabitha corrected gently. And I cannot remain so. Please let me help. Martha studied her for a long moment, then nodded. All right, but you sit while you work. As they prepared dinner together, Tabitha gathered her courage to broach the subject that had been weighing on her mind. Martha, has there been any confirmation about Mr. Pickering? The older woman's hands stilled. Caleb received word yesterday. It was Pickering, all right. Seems he was robbed and murdered on the road back from Carson City. Tabitha closed her eyes briefly. Then I truly have nowhere to go. That's not necessarily true, Martha said carefully. Elko's growing fast. There might be work for a young woman with some education. What sort of work? Tabitha asked, thinking of the limited options for women in Boston: governess, companion seamstress, none of which had paid enough to sustain her after her parents' deaths. Teaching, perhaps, or work in one of the shops. Not ideal for a lady of your background, I expect, but honest work. I'm not afraid of honest work, Tabitha assured her. In fact, she was interrupted by the sound of the front door opening, followed by Caleb's tired greeting. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, his clothes dusty from the day's labor, his expression brightening slightly at the sight of Tabitha at the table. You're up and about, he observed. That's good. Thanks to your and Martha's care, Tabitha replied. Mr. Grayson, Martha has just told me about Mr. Pickering. I want you to know I intend to find employment in Elko as soon as possible to repay your kindness and make my own way. Caleb frowned, pulling off his gloves. There's no rush, Miss Cooper. Winter's coming on and traveling alone isn't safe, especially with those bandits still at large. But I cannot impose indefinitely, she protested. It's no imposition, he said firmly. Besides, there's plenty you could do here if you're set on being useful. Martha's been saying she could use help with the house and garden, especially since her arthritis has been troubling her. Martha shot him a sharp look, which he pointedly ignored. Are you offering me employment? Tabitha asked, confused by the exchange. I'm offering you a place to stay through the winter, at least, Caleb replied. Come spring, if you still want to try your luck in Elko, I won't stand in your way. It was a generous offer, one that solved her immediate problem. Yet Tabitha hesitated, aware that accepting would place her in an unusual situation, an unmarried woman living in a bachelor's home, even with Martha's presence as chaperone. As though reading her thoughts, Martha interjected, "It's a respectable arrangement, Miss Cooper. I've been with this family 30 years and I can vouch for Caleb's character. Besides, I really could use the help." "Then I accept with gratitude," Tabitha said, relief washing over her. "And please, both of you must call me Tabitha." Caleb nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Tabitha it is, then, and I'm Caleb." As autumn deepened into winter, Tabitha found herself settling into life at the Grayson ranch. Her days took on a comfortable routine: mornings spent helping Martha with household tasks, afternoons devoted to the vegetable garden or mending clothes, and evenings around the fire, often listening to Caleb read from one of the books in his modest library. She discovered that, beneath his reserved exterior, Caleb was well-read and thoughtful. He had attended school back east until his 16th year, when his father's failing health had called him home to the ranch. His bookshelves held volumes of poetry, history, and literature. Emerson, Thoreau, Shakespeare, and Dickens were particular favorites. "My mother's influence," he explained one evening when he caught Tabitha examining his collection. She believed living in the wilderness was no excuse for an uncultivated mind. "She sounds like a remarkable woman," Tabitha said. "She was." A shadow crossed his face. "She died when I was 18, pneumonia. Father followed 5 years later." "I'm sorry," Tabitha said softly, understanding the loss all too well. "My parents died within weeks of each other last year. Influenza." Caleb met her gaze, the shared experience of grief creating a silent bond between them. "It leaves a hole nothing else quite fills, doesn't it?" That brief moment of connection marked a turning point in their relationship. Caleb began to include Tabitha in more aspects of ranch life, teaching her to ride again. She had learned as a child but had few opportunities in recent years, showing her how the ranch operated and even introducing her to the basics of cattle management. "Never know when such knowledge might come in handy," he said with a shrug when she questioned the practicality of a lady learning such things. December brought heavy snows that isolated the ranch from town. Christmas was a simple but warm affair, with a small pine tree cut from the property and decorated with handmade ornaments. Martha prepared a feast, and Caleb surprised Tabitha with a gift: a leather-bound journal and pen. "I noticed you writing on scraps of paper," he explained somewhat awkwardly. "Thought you might like something proper." Touched by his thoughtfulness, Tabitha presented him with her own gift: a hand-knitted scarf she had secretly made during the long evenings. "It's not much," she apologized. "It's perfect," he assured her, immediately wrapping it around his neck. As they sat by the fire that night, Tabitha felt a contentment she hadn't experienced in years. The ranch had become more than a temporary shelter; it had become a home. And Caleb had become more than just her benefactor. The realization both thrilled and terrified her. She had come to Nevada to marry a stranger out of necessity, never expecting to find genuine affection. Now, she found herself drawn to a different man entirely, one who had shown her kindness without expectation, who valued her mind as well as her domestic skills, who made her heart race with a simple smile. But did Caleb share these feelings? He treated her with unfailing courtesy and growing friendship, but he had given no indication of romantic interest. Perhaps he still saw her as an obligation, a woman in need of protection until spring arrived and she could make her own way. January brought a brief thaw, allowing Caleb to ride into town for supplies and mail. He returned with news that the gang responsible for the train robbery had been captured in Utah territory. "They're being brought back to stand trial," he told Tabitha and Martha as they unpacked the provisions. "The sheriff says they recovered some of the stolen goods." Hope flared in Tabitha's chest. "My locket." "I mentioned it specifically," Caleb said, reaching into his pocket. "The sheriff asked me to give you this." He held out a small cloth pouch. With trembling fingers, Tabitha opened it and tipped the contents into her palm. There lay her mother's locket, the delicate chain now broken, but the gold oval itself undamaged. "Oh," she gasped, tears springing to her eyes. "I never thought to see it again." "Let me," Caleb said gently, taking the locket and examining the chain. "I can repair this. My father taught me basic metalwork." That evening, after Martha had retired, Caleb worked by lamplight at the kitchen table, his large hands surprisingly deft as he mended the tiny links. Tabitha watched, mesmerized by his concentration and care. "There," he said finally, holding it up for her inspection. "Good as new." "Thank you," Tabitha whispered, reaching for it, but Caleb shook his head. "Turn around," he instructed softly. She obeyed, her breath catching as she felt him step closer, his presence warm behind her. With exquisite gentleness, he placed the locket around her neck, his fingers brushing against her skin as he fastened the clasp. The brief contact sent shivers down her spine. "It suits you," he murmured as she turned to face him again. They stood close, the lamplight casting a golden glow over their features. Something shifted in Caleb's expression, a softening, a vulnerability she hadn't seen before. His eyes dropped to her lips, then back to meet her gaze, a question in their blue depths. The moment stretched, taut with unspoken feelings. Then Martha's voice called from the hallway, asking if they needed anything before she turned in, and the spell was broken. Caleb stepped back, clearing his throat. "Good night, Tabitha," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "Good night, Caleb," she replied, her fingers clutching the precious locket, her heart racing with possibilities. February brought illness to the ranch. First Miguel, then Tom fell ill with a winter fever. Caleb worked double shifts to compensate, coming home exhausted each night. Tabitha and Martha prepared remedies and nourishing broths, but when Martha herself succumbed to the sickness, the burden of nursing fell entirely to Tabitha. She moved between patients, changing compresses, administering medicine, and ensuring everyone remained hydrated. Caleb watched her with growing admiration. "You would have made a fine doctor," he commented one evening as she checked Martha's temperature. Tabitha smiled tiredly. "My father was a physician. I often assisted him, though it wasn't considered proper for a lady to take too much interest in medicine." "Proper or not, you have a gift," Caleb said. "You've probably saved us all a trip to the doctor in Elko." His praise warmed her, but as the days passed with little rest, Tabitha's own strength began to wane. One morning, after a particularly rough night with Martha, she rose from the sick and immediately felt the room spin around her. She barely registered Caleb's alarmed shout as darkness claimed her. She awoke to find herself in bed, a cool cloth on her forehead, and Caleb sitting beside her, his face etched with concern. "You fainted," he informed her, his voice tight with worry. "You're burning up." "Martha," Tabitha croaked, attempting to rise. "Is improving," Caleb said firmly, gently pressing her back against the pillows. "As are Tom and Miguel. You, however, have worked yourself to exhaustion." Over the next few days, their roles reversed as Caleb tended to Tabitha. He was a surprisingly capable nurse, his touch gentle as he helped her sip broth or changed the cool compress on her forehead. In her fevered state, Tabitha found herself speaking more freely than she might have otherwise. "You have beautiful eyes," she murmured one afternoon, her filter weakened by illness. "Like the sky in summer," a flush spread across Caleb's cheeks. "The fever's making you talk nonsense." "Not nonsense," she insisted drowsily. "Truth." As her fever broke and clarity returned, Tabitha remembered these exchanges with mortification. Had she truly been so forward? Yet Caleb gave no indication that her behavior had discomfited him. If anything, he seemed more attentive than ever, finding excuses to check on her throughout the day as she recuperated. By March, life on the ranch had returned to its normal rhythm. The snow began to melt, revealing patches of brown earth and early wildflowers. Spring was approaching, and with it, the agreement that Tabitha would decide whether to seek her fortune in Elko. The prospect, once anticipated, now filled her with dread. The thought of leaving the ranch, leaving Caleb, created a physical ache in her chest. Yet pride prevented her from asking to stay without invitation, and Caleb had not renewed his offer of permanent employment. One mild afternoon, Tabitha sat on the porch, mending one of Caleb's shirts while watching him work with a new colt in the corral. His patience with the spirited animal, the way he spoke softly to calm its fears, reminded her of how he had treated her when they first met with that same gentle steadiness. Martha joined her, easing into the rocking chair with a sigh. "He's good with wild things," the older woman observed, following Tabitha's gaze. "Always has been." "Yes," Tabitha agreed softly. "You love him," Martha stated, not a question but a simple observation. Startled, Tabitha pricked her finger with the needle, a drop of blood welling on her skin. "Aye. That is, it would be presumptuous," Martha chuckled. "Child, these old eyes see plenty. The question is, what do you plan to do about it?" "Do," Tabitha echoed. "What can I do? In less than a month I'm expected to leave for Elko. Caleb has been kind, but he's never indicated he wishes me to stay permanently." Martha fixed her with a stern look. "That man has never been good with words, especially when his heart's involved. But if you can't see how he feels when he looks at you, you're not nearly as observant as I took you for." Before Tabitha could respond, Martha rose with another sigh. "Pride's a luxury for those who already have everything they need. Remember that." The conversation left Tabitha unsettled. Could Martha be right? Had she misinterpreted Caleb's kindness, mistaking simple friendship for deeper feelings? And even if Martha was correct, what could she do? A proper lady didn't declare her feelings first. Yet as the days passed, Tabitha found herself studying Caleb more closely, noting the way his gaze lingered on her when he thought she wasn't looking, how he found reasons to be near her, the care he took to ensure her comfort. Small gestures that, taken together, spoke of more than mere friendship. One evening, as they sat by the fire after Martha had retired, Tabitha gathered her courage. "Caleb," she began hesitantly, "I've been thinking about our agreement." He looked up from his book, his expression carefully neutral. "About going to Elko." "Yes." She twisted her hands in her lap. "I'm grateful for all you've done, taking me in, giving me time to heal and find my bearings." "It was nothing," he said, his voice gruff. "It was everything," she corrected softly. "You saved my life, but more than that, you gave me a home when I had none." Something flickered in his eyes, hope, perhaps. "Are you saying you want to stay?" I would like that very much," Tabitha admitted, her heart pounding, "if you'll have me." "As Martha's helper, you mean," Caleb said, his tone difficult to read. Tabitha took a deep breath, Martha's words about pride echoing in her mind. "No," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "not just as a helper." The silence that followed seemed endless. Caleb set his book aside and leaned forward, his eyes intense. "What are you saying, Tabitha?" "I'm saying that I care for you," she managed, her cheeks burning. "More than I should, perhaps, but I cannot help it. These months with you have shown me what kind of man you are, and I've come to love you." "There, I've said it, and if you think me forward or inappropriate, I'll understand completely." Her rambling was cut short as Caleb crossed the space between them in 2 strides, knelt before her, and took her hands in his. "Tabitha Cooper," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I've been trying to find the courage to say those same words to you for weeks. I love you. I think I started falling for you that first day when you stood there by the creek, hurt and afraid but still fighting. Every day since has only deepened those feelings." Joy bloomed in Tabitha's chest, so intense it was almost painful. "Truly, truly," he confirmed, raising one hand to cup her cheek. "I didn't want to speak because I feared you'd feel obligated, given your circumstances. I wanted you to choose freely, even if that meant choosing to leave." "I choose you," Tabitha whispered. "I choose this life, this ranch, this home we could build together." Caleb's smile was radiant. "Then marry me, Tabitha. Be my wife, my partner, the mother of my children. Stay, not as an employee or a guest, but as the mistress of this home and the keeper of my heart." "Yes," she said simply, tears of happiness spilling down her cheeks. "Yes, I will marry you." He kissed her then, a tender, reverent kiss that spoke of promises kept and a future shared. When they finally broke apart, breathless and smiling, Caleb reached into his pocket. "I've been carrying this for weeks," he confessed, opening his palm to reveal a simple gold band set with a small pearl. "It was my mother's. She made me promise to give it only to a woman worthy of becoming a Grayson." "And am I?" Tabitha asked, half teasing, half serious. "More than worthy," Caleb assured her, sliding the ring onto her finger. "You're the answer to a prayer I didn't know I was making until you appeared in my life." News of their engagement spread quickly. Martha was unsurprised and thoroughly pleased with herself for her matchmaking efforts. Tom and Miguel offered hearty congratulations, having grown fond of the Eastern lady who had nursed them through illness. The townsfolk of Elko, when Caleb and Tabitha rode in together to announce their plans, responded with warmth and welcome. They were married on a perfect spring day in April, the ceremony performed by the traveling minister who made monthly visits to outlying ranches. The ranch house was decorated with wildflowers, and neighbors from miles around gathered to celebrate the union. Tabitha wore a simple white dress that Martha had helped her sew, with her mother's locket around her neck and wildflowers in her hair. As they spoke their vows beneath the old cottonwood tree where Caleb's parents had also been married, Tabitha marveled at the journey that had brought her to this moment. The train robbery that had seemed such a disaster had, in fact, been the beginning of her greatest blessing. "I promise to cherish you, protect you, and stand by you through all of life's challenges," Caleb vowed, his blue eyes shining with love. "You came to Nevada seeking a husband and found me instead. I'll spend my life making sure you never regret that twist of fate. I promise to love you faithfully, support your dreams, and create a home filled with warmth and joy," Tabitha responded, her voice steady despite the emotion welling in her throat. "What began as necessity has blossomed into the deepest love I could imagine. Every step that led me here was worth it, because they led me to you." Their first months of marriage were a time of adjustment and discovery. Tabitha took to her role as ranch wife with enthusiasm, learning from Martha while adding her own touches to the household. Caleb consulted her on ranch decisions, valuing her practical intelligence and fresh perspective. Together, they expanded the garden, added a room to the house, and began planning for the children they both hoped would come. In the evenings, they continued their tradition of reading aloud, now often sharing the same chair. Tabitha nestled in Caleb's embrace. Summer arrived, bringing with it prosperity as the cattle flourished and the garden yielded a bountiful harvest. One hot afternoon, as Tabitha picked vegetables for dinner, she was startled by the sound of approaching horses. Looking up, she saw a wagon coming up the drive, driven by a stranger. Wiping her hands on her apron, she walked to meet the visitor, shading her eyes against the sun. "Mrs. Grayson," called the man, an older gentleman with silver hair and a kindly face. "Tabitha Cooper that was." "Yes," she replied cautiously. The man climbed down from the wagon with surprising agility for his age. "My name is James Whitaker, attorney from Carson City. I've been searching for you for quite some time." Confused, Tabitha called for Caleb, who came quickly from the barn, his stance protective as he joined his wife. "Mr. Grayson," the attorney greeted him. "I bring news concerning Samuel Pickering's estate." "Pickering?" Caleb's eyebrows rose. "What does that have to do with my wife?" "Everything, as it happens," Mr. Whitaker explained. "You see, Mr. Pickering updated his will shortly before his death. Having exchanged correspondence with Miss Cooper and agreed to marriage, he named her his sole heir, should anything happen to him before the wedding could take place." Tabitha stared at the man in disbelief. "But we never met. He couldn't have known if I would suit him." "Nevertheless, the will is quite clear," the attorney said, producing documents from his case. "Miss Cooper, Mrs. Grayson now, I understand, is entitled to his entire estate, including his ranch, livestock, and substantial savings in the Elko Bank. It's taken some time to locate you after the train robbery, but the matter can now be settled legally." Stunned, Tabitha turned to Caleb, whose expression was unreadable. "I don't want it," she said firmly. "I married for love, not property." "It's rightfully yours," Caleb said quietly. "Pickering wanted to provide for you, even in death." "But I don't need it," she insisted. "I have everything I need right here." Mr. Whitaker cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should discuss this inside. There are papers to review, regardless of your decision." Over coffee in the kitchen, the attorney explained the full extent of Samuel Pickering's bequest. His ranch encompassed 500 acres of prime grazing land, his herd numbered over 200 head of cattle, and his bank account contained nearly $5,000, a substantial sum. It would be foolish to refuse such an inheritance, Mr. Whittaker advised. Even if you have no need of it personally, consider the security it provides, the opportunities for your future children. Caleb, who had been silent throughout much of the explanation, finally spoke. He's right, Tabitha. This changes things for us for the better. But I don't want things to change, she protested. I'm happy with our life exactly as it is. The life won't change, Caleb assured her, taking her hand. Just the possibilities within it. We could combine the two properties, build something lasting for generations to come. In the end, Tabitha agreed to accept the inheritance with one condition, that a portion of the money be used to establish a fund for families affected by outlaws and train robberies. Mr. Whittaker was impressed by the gesture and promised to make the necessary arrangements. After the attorney departed, promising to return with final paperwork, Tabitha found herself overwhelmed by the day's revelations. She walked to the porch, needing air and space to think. Caleb followed, concern evident in his expression. "Are you all right?" he asked, standing beside her as they looked out over the land that had become their home. "It feels strange," she admitted, "to benefit from the death of a man I never knew, and I worry." "About what?" "That you might think I've changed, or that our marriage will change because of this money." Caleb turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Tabitha, I married you when you had nothing but the clothes on your back. I would have spent my life with you happily if we never had more than this ranch provides. The inheritance is a blessing, yes, but it's not why I love you." Tears filled her eyes. "I know, but no buts," he said firmly. "We'll use this opportunity wisely, build something good together. But wealth doesn't define us, our choices do. And I choose you, Tabitha Grayson, money or no money, every single day." His words calmed the uncertainty within her. Together, they watched the sunset paint the Nevada sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, standing at the threshold of a future neither could have imagined when fate first brought them together. Autumn came again, marking a year since Tabitha's arrival in Nevada. The changes in that time were remarkable. 2 ranches merged into one thriving operation. The house expanded to accommodate their growing ambitions, and most precious of all, the child growing beneath Tabitha's heart, due to arrive with the spring flowers. On the anniversary of the train robbery, Caleb surprised Tabitha with a special gift, a framed photograph of the two of them on their wedding day, standing beneath the cottonwood tree. "To remember how sometimes the worst days can lead to the best life," he said, placing it on the mantel. Tabitha leaned against him, her hand resting on her swelling belly. "When I left Boston, I thought I was traveling toward security, not love. I never imagined that losing everything would lead me to gaining so much more." "You never lost everything," Caleb corrected gently. "You carried the most important things with you, your courage, your kindness, your ability to love. Those are what I fell in love with, what I'll always treasure." "And I fell in love with your goodness," Tabitha replied, turning to face him. "The man who found a barefoot stranger and brought her home." As spring returned to the Nevada landscape, Tabitha gave birth to a healthy daughter they named Sarah Martha Grayson, honoring both their mothers. Martha, now semi-retired but still very much a part of the household, doted on the infant, proclaiming her the most beautiful child ever born. The years that followed brought more children, twin boys, James and Thomas, and another daughter, Elizabeth, each one a blessing that deepened the bond between Tabitha and Caleb. The ranch prospered, becoming one of the most successful operations in the territory. They added orchards, expanded the cattle herd, and built a new, larger home that still maintained the warmth and character of the original. With their increasing prosperity came opportunities to give back. Tabitha established a small school on their property for ranch children who lived too far from town for daily travel. She taught reading, writing, and basic medicine, while Caleb instructed the older boys in ranching skills. Their home became a gathering place for the community, known for its hospitality and open doors. On their 10th anniversary, Caleb gave Tabitha another special gift, the deed to a building in Elko that he had purchased and renovated as a women's shelter and employment agency. It was named Cooper House, in honor of the young woman who had once found herself alone and in need of assistance in a strange land. For women who need a second chance, Caleb explained as Tabitha, tears in her eyes, explored the comfortable rooms furnished with everything a woman starting over might need. So no one else has to face what you faced alone. As they walked home that evening, their children racing ahead along the familiar path, Tabitha reflected on the journey of her life. The frightened young woman who had fled Boston to marry a stranger could never have imagined the happiness that awaited her. Not in the marriage she had planned, but in the love she had found unexpectedly, with a quiet cowboy who had discovered her barefoot and brought her home. "What are you thinking?" Caleb asked, his arm around her waist, his face lined now with a decade of Nevada sun but still handsome to her eyes. "That sometimes life's greatest blessings come disguised as disasters," she replied, leaning into his embrace. "And that love finds us in the most unexpected places. In my case, by a creek in the middle of nowhere," he teased, pressing a kiss to her temple. "In my case, in the arms of a stranger who became my whole world," she countered softly. Together, they walked toward home, toward their children, toward the life they had built from nothing but love and determination. The train robbery that had once seemed the end of Tabitha's hopes had, in fact, been only the beginning of her greatest adventure, one that continued to unfold with each passing day in the heart of the Nevada wilderness, alongside the man who had captured her heart and never let it go.